So we're gathered for another sculpture forum. And I'm gathered with regular stalwart Jock Ireland, very dependable. This whole thing has been beautifully filmed by Rachael Bohlander. Thank you, Rachael. We are joined by Lydia Gladkova. Thank you for joining us for this, Lydia. It's great to see you. It was great to be with you up at Storm King, which is where we went. Storm King up in New York State to see an exhibition now. Arlene Shechet. Arlene has installed, I think, 6 large steel pieces out in the grounds at Storm King, and has in the house there in the gallery a number of smaller ceramic pieces and 1 or 2 slightly larger mixed media pieces, wood, ceramic, steel. I enjoyed our day out there, and I came away with very conflicting feelings about my experience of the work. And I'll go into that a bit, but first of all, I'll invite Jock or Lydia to step in and give some responses to their thoughts, feelings, ideas about what they saw, experienced, felt. Either of you, Jock?
Well, I had I enjoyed the day out there, and I hadn't been up to Storm King in a while, and I thought Storm King was pretty terrific, just as a place full of sculpture and with very few distractions. But I have sort of reservations about Arlene's work, in that it sort of didn't feel right at Storm King. It felt a little Disneylandish. There's a postmodern quality to her work that a sort of unreality about it. Everything at Storm King, or most of the stuff at Storm King, felt very real. There was something as if her pieces were cars parked inside the grounds, and that I found a bit disturbing. But I'll stop there. The color was interesting. I'm anxious to hear what Lydia hear about her response. Her color sense, or the way she works with color, is so terrific.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear Lydia's thoughts as well. Lydia.
I had a good day too, and I think Arlene's sculptures contributed to that. I felt good vibes coming from them. I felt she's a good person, which is very good to feel coming from sculptures. I also had different experience from the outdoors pieces, with the outdoors pieces and with the indoors pieces. So let me start with outdoors. As I said, it was a good feeling being there out there with them included. That being said, I have some reservations too. if I may. This group of sculptures is called Girl Power. And I think in the lecture at the studio school, she spoke about this idea for the title. And being a girl, I wasn't satisfied with the amount of power she gave them and she gave me by extension. I wanted to see more sort of gutsy kind of qualities, them being strong and assertive, and I didn't see it. I thought of this quote by Coco Chanel. As an elegant woman, before she leaves the house, throws the last look in the mirror and removes one accessory. And I thought that these girls should have looked in the mirror and removed like 5 necklaces.
Yes, I agree with that.
Another thought that I had, I think with sculpture, it's very cool when you have a feeling that sort of everything is functional, that everything is needed for them to stand the way they do and to be the way they are, that everything comes out of necessity. And for comparison, because we saw it on the same day, just a short walk from there, Martin Perrier's work, I thought that everything was necessary there. He had these little round openings in the sculpture, and it felt to me like they're necessary for the sculpture to breathe. However, Arlene's works, there were many elements that felt more decorative than functional, like accessories. And I thought it would be nice to remove them and try to see how they would look.
No, I think I felt very much the same about the outdoor pieces. I ended up thinking that not each, but in many cases, those outdoor pieces comprised more than one sculpture. I would have, I, like you, Lydia, I very much wanted to get in there and start taking parts away and simplify the things. There seemed to be, they created for me a kind of a feeling of anxiety, really. They were so complex, complicated without being complex, and busy. And they seemed, again, picking up on what you said there was a significant, for me, contrast between particularly the smaller ceramic pieces inside what they call the museum, and the large steel pieces outside. The smaller ceramic pieces, because they were all made out of one material, nearly. I mean, at least the ones in the furthest room of the indoor spaces, relatively small ceramic works that sat on, I thought, unnecessarily, again, complicating the situation, sat on pedestals and then had an intermediary between the pedestal and the object, usually of a piece of steel, which I thought was unnecessary. But the ceramic pieces, I got engaged with them. They felt somewhat like kind of organs that had been extracted from some living body. Again, I ended up feeling that they were, for the most part, they began to be overly complex, overly complicated, I guess I should say. And this sense of somebody who was very much enjoying what they were doing, and I liked that feeling. I liked that sense that the author of these works was, was being playful and fairly freely so. But I wished somehow that the author had, I think, as you sort of indicated, Lydia, taken a second, a third, a fourth look, and not just, it seemed as if, at least in the ceramic pieces, and I mean, I know you have a limited amount of control working with clay, but it felt to me like she accepted whatever happened, and didn't question it as I would have wanted to do.
Your impulse and Lydia's to edit these things is interesting, but I'm afraid that if you start removing accessories, you're not going to be left with anything. My feeling when I was looking at these things was that it reminded me of waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep because your mind is racing, going from one thing to another without connection.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that connects with my experience of particularly the outdoor pieces of making me feel sort of slightly anxious, well, maybe more than slightly anxious. One of the nice things about Storm King, of course, being this very expansive outdoor space, is that you get to see works from a great distance. And one of the experiences I had with Arlene's work was that, seen from considerable distance, they looked much more interesting and whole and complete and singular than they did when you actually got close to them and were able to engage all the complicated bits and pieces that they're comprised of. That struck me with some force in relation to these works in particular, is just how my expectations of them, seen from a great distance, were not, my expectations were not met, and in fact were not only not met, but they were disappointing when I got close to them. Again, Lydia, you're talking about functionality. I mean, one of the things that bothered me about some of these works, or some parts of these works, was that there seemed to be elements in there that were purely functional, that were there in order to allow the piece to stand up, as it were, in the orientation in which it was, and that take that element away, the thing would fall over. And it seemed to be there, essentially to have, that structural function, and it therefore differentiated itself in that way from the rest of the material that, whatever else was going on. And I would have just taken it away and let the thing fall over and see what we have, I really find it objectionable when, a sculpture depends on an element that has a different, works in a different way from the rest of the thing, and is essentially there for practical purpose. I also, there's a very large Louise Nevelson piece that is within within viewing distance of at least one of Arlene's pieces. And I was again struck by how there was a connection there, and how if one painted the Nevelson not all black as it is, how close it might come to one of Arlene's pieces. I mean, I'm not a fan of Nevelson's work, generally speaking. It'd be interesting to talk about it sometime, but I also, that gave me the thought, well, what happens if you paint Arlene's work all one color, and not go for this kind of very, I don't know, sexy, smooth, polished, fine, shiny, glossy kind of finish. That would be an interesting exercise.
I wanted to also say a couple of things about color. Jock asked me earlier and I didn't answer. Them being these bright colors, all different, makes you think of playground, kids' playground. And playgrounds are great, they're humanistic. Even when kids are not there playing, you feel them. And this humanistic warm angle, I think, was missing here. Was this feeling, well, for me at least, that they look kind of like playgrounds, but playgrounds are better. And there was, when we were next to Martin Perrier's sculpture, there was a little girl who attempted to climb it using these little round openings, which was to me like a testament of its warmth and playful, whimsical, humanistic quality. Well, look at this. It looks like a slide, right? From this angle. But it isn't. It isn't. Okay, and I wish it were. Right? I wish this playful quality was really there. There is a hint of it. It's like it wants to be that, but it isn't.
Yeah, it's determined to become an important sculpture instead of, and it's so finished. In the lecture at the studio school, she talked about how many layers of paint and working with people from car manufacturing companies, and you can see that she's really involved with finishing the big outdoor sculptures. And it's kind of taken her to a new place, and that's nice. But it's just a misguided direction, it seems to me. There's taking her away from this, the quality of play and that you're talking about, Lydia.
Yeah, it's difficult to be, to go from those smaller ceramic pieces. Again, I mean, speaking of finish, they depended a great deal on the surfaces, I thought, for their the way one engaged them depended very much on these. They are very standardly finished with I don't quite know the process, but a kind of glaze that is almost like bubbly, as if they're covered with something that's how would you say, almost as if they've got a coating of some very almost furry surface. and that seemed to be a kind of given that I thought was I would have wanted and the color and the surface seemed to be very important in the ceramic pieces, and to the detriment of allowing one a kind of a more accessible engagement with the form, as if the surface and the color were in some way a disguise, a distraction. And again, that was my sense of the outdoor pieces as well, was that the color and the surface were makeup. To go back to Lydia's thoughts about girl power, yeah. So I mean, I again, return to my idea of getting rid of it, getting rid of the color, and see what we've got. But I also thought of playgrounds, Lydia, play spaces. You made of complicated plastic tubes and things that kids can climb in and through and what have you. I did find myself remembering seeing those things and seeing kids playing on them. But you can't imagine kids playing on these things. They're too sharp and too shiny and too polished. Yeah, Jock, I think you're right. I mean, I think there's an ambition here that is, perhaps misguided. I don't know. I think I ended up feeling that that there was a sense of wastefulness, and that's a horrible thing to say, but that is, that somehow there a kind of excess or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you, and in that, and it's. I
also found myself thinking about how they were not well served by being outdoors. That had they been in an urban environment, I might have felt somewhat differently about them. That may have been a function of having seen them from a great distance and then getting close to them and being less satisfied the closer I got to them, finding them less satisfactory the closer I got to them.
Yeah, I didn't find them satisfactory at a distance, and I did find the de Suvero's and many other sculptures up there satisfying from both a distance and up close, and that's this thing that I'm calling postmodern. There's just something missing at the heart, a driving force that that isn't there, and it's as if these pieces could be blown away by the wind, and the wind as a sort of natural force, and a natural force that other work at Storm King engages with.
I think my point about seeing them from a distance was just the contrast between I mean, it's true of many works, but yeah, not of the de Suvero's, as you said, Jock, but anyway, there was just, I was just very conscious of the way in which, when I saw one of these things from a great distance, I was eager to get close to it and to see what it really was, and that was a fairly unusual experience, and as I've indicated, I think the closer I got to them and began to see that there were, a lot more going on than I had anticipated. I had anticipated from a distance, I'd anticipated something much more resolved. These things felt very, very, very unresolved. I think that's what I felt basically. That they needed work. They needed sorting out. That was my feeling. Maybe I'm just completely missing the point of them. That's always possible.
I wanted to talk more about the indoor sculptures. So they all had this surface, right? Very specific, like Garth said. I thought that it made them look old. Old, See, that's the same that what happens with paper mache, right? When it dries, it shrinks and it makes it look old. And to me, it was a problem because I like sculptures that look exuberant, full of energy. And these were perhaps tired. I thought the reason was the surface. And it also occurred to me, and then I couldn't shake this thought that the surface looks like a sponge. What is this animation character who is a sponge? I forget.
SpongeBob.
That's it, yeah. So, sometimes you have these thoughts, you look at art and something occurs to you and then it just bothers you and you can't get rid of it. You'll never forget it. So I thought at some point that their surface makes them look like sponge, and then see, it's been a few days and I still remember it. So what did you think of the indoor pieces specifically?
My response was pretty negative. I walked into that room where most of the smaller pieces are, and I felt everything was falling apart. It was it just, everything fell apart. But I was surprised watching Rachael's video and the quality of attention that she brought to the pieces as she was filming it, so held everything together in a way that was really surprising to me. Yeah, but otherwise, these there's just not enough in these small pieces, and some of the small pieces are quite big, but they don't. There's no real construction. It's about their I don't know, the differences among the parts. It's about the way they don't hold together, and that's just a disturbing sort of rationale for making sculpture for me.
Yeah, indoor there were pieces that were entirely ceramic, and then there were pieces that were mixed with wood and some ceramic elements, some steel elements, and painted differently. Those I found less engaging than the purely ceramic pieces, where at least the consistency of material, excuse me, gave a coherence to the object. Maybe they were not formally so coherent, but at least they held together just because they were made, as it were, they were all of a piece. as it were, regardless of what kind of a piece it was. They were all of a piece, whereas the objects that were made of various materials seemed to have no reason for being. They didn't seem to have any, they were conglomerations of stuff that didn't add up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the students responding to Arlene's lecture. She was in the lecture, Arlene talked about maquettes or sculptures she made out of paper and miscellaneous bits of this and that in order to to get the bigger pieces started. And I was hoping that some of those maquette-like things might be part of this show, but they weren't.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's that was disappointing.
Yes, she's obviously, has, in order to make these works, has had access to very impressive resources, and that's something that comes with a successful career. And then you look at the work, and you think, well, what's driving this? Is it the career driving the work, or is the work driving the career? And at some point, the career comes out of the work, and then at some point, if you're not, not if you're not, I mean, at some point, the danger is that the career begins to drive the work, and you're making the work in order to maintain or develop the career, rather than the other way around. And I just found myself wondering if Arlene is at that point where this opportunity to have this outdoor work at Storm King's a wonderful opportunity, and very exciting. And obviously she's taken it on and made something, very bold and brave. And yet at the same time, somehow or other, it doesn't seem to have I don't know. I was also reminded of 60s sculpture in London, colourful objects. And I found myself saying, it's 60s sculpture gone to seed, which is not a nice thing to say, but there we are. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the sculptures consist, of too much. I mean, there's open, there are, open twisted planes, there are enclosed solid forms, there are lines, there are forms that are, painted different colors, so that it makes it very difficult to read the form. And the engagement with the spaces that are working in and out and through the forms does not seem to have been really thought about. I didn't get any sense of that, although clearly the way spaces are used is important to the work, because there are passages through, and often tube-like forms where you can sometimes be blocked or sometimes see through. Things not getting assimilated, things not getting brought into a meaningful relationship, so that the parts exist together, and to some extent work together and work in opposition, but they don't ever resolve themselves into a kind of coherent form that you can contemplate and reflect on. There's a kind of uncertainty about them, uncertainty. Lack of resolution, I guess, is what I'm saying. They keep you guessing, they're very open-ended in that way. And that that's, you know, I had mixed feelings about them. They seem to for the most part, not acknowledge the existence of gravity. They don't, as I was saying a minute ago, they don't seem to be able to give equal weight to space as to matter.
Yeah, but what I had a problem with was these foreign or external thoughts that kept coming into my head. Like I talked about necklaces, I talked about SpongeBob. When we were next to this one, the orange one, I remember Rachael said that some elements look like gills, you know, the fish gills, and I thought, yeah, that they do. All these foreign thoughts, you know, when you're looking at sculpture, you don't want to think about this stuff, all this nonsense, right? You want to be moved and touched emotionally.
Well, I think there's a place for humor, but I'm not sure that
Yeah, that's not the sort of.
I didn't feel there was that much humor in the outdoor pieces. That I did have a sense in the indoor ceramic pieces that there was a kind of playful and humorous kind of character to them, an element of that at least, that I enjoyed.
So why do you think she did that? Overcomplicate these things, Garth. Do you think simplicity is frightening?
So because simplicity is what?
Frightening.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's on the one hand, I think it's playful. You know, to go adding, making it a little more this, a little more that, give it poke a hole in here, let's poke a hole in there, let's try that. You know, that was one sense. On the other hand, I think that there's an anxiety involved that if it gets to be too refined, too simplified, too elegant, too that it's going, there's seem to be a fear of some kind of things becoming vacuous and empty, and so the kind of to make them more complicated is to somehow or other enrich them, which I don't think is the case. Not here anyway.
Yeah, there is an important connection between this work and society, or the world we're living in at this moment, world full of distractions.
I think I think that's right. There is very little sense in this work that one could be still for a minute. Whereas that again, just to refer back to, and maybe it's totally unfair to contrast this with the Martin Purrier installation that we saw, where when you come upon the Martin Purrier thing, me anyway, I felt could just breathe, and be at one with it, I didn't feel that even close with this work. So there we are. It's on the one hand, it's exciting and brave and very busy, very energetic, very, I guess, ambitious. But we seem to be finding it in the end not giving us what it is we would like to have, some kind of sense of resolution, completeness, wholeness, oneness. That fair?
I think so.
See you all soon.
Yeah.